All right, it is February 25th, 2025. This is a joint hearing with Senate Education and House Education to walk through the draft language for a bill that outlines the governor's transformation proposal. We are joined by the Secretary of Education and the Chief Counsel for the Agency of Education to do that with us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you and thank you for both for being here.
Thank you very much for having us. And so Saunders, Secretary of Education. Emily, I'll allow you to introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, everyone. Emily Simmons, General Counsel at AOE.
Today,
Before we get started, I was trying to go through my head what would be a good way to do engagement here. I think that as we go through kind of section by section, if you have clarifying questions, please ask them at the time. If you have bigger, sort of more global questions or need to make a global statement, let's wait till the end. All right, thank you.
Today, we will review the legislative language for the Governor's Education Transformation Proposal. Before we get into the weeds, I think it's important to briefly reflect on why we are contemplating large-scale changes to improve our education system. The state of Vermont has experienced a significant decline in student enrollment. We've seen over 20% reduction over the past 20 years. We've also seen a decline in academic performance, with the state of Vermont reporting some of the steepest declines in reading performance compared to other states. We also know that Vermonters value a whole child approach to measuring student success. But when you look at other measures, including mental health and college absenteeism, those measures are also trending in the wrong direction. We have seen a double-digit property tax increase. We know that this is unsustainable for Vermonters. Our funding system is difficult to understand. While our current funding formula is designed to give poor communities the ability to generate more funds for students, that is not happening in practice. In practice, we see great inequities in our system and tremendous variability in terms of student opportunities and teacher pay. Vermont's government structure is complex, with 52 supervisory units, under which there are 101 districts. And all of these layers in a relatively small state divert dollars away for where they're needed the most, which is imminent. It is really important to note that the challenges we face are systemic and longstanding. District leaders, educators are doing their best for students under increasing pressures that are often outside of their control. The structure of our system is an obstacle to our success, not the commitment of our educators and community members. Leading up to the legislative session, there was a call for bold action to do what is right for students and what is right for taxpayers. We can't just make small tweaks, we must redesign our system. That being said, we have to acknowledge that this proposal is big, it's very complex. Undertaking any form of this plan will take collaboration, it will take time, and it will take a relentless focus on improving opportunities for students, especially when the work gets harder, and it will get harder. Over the past several weeks, we have provided an enormous amount of detail through policy briefs, testimonies, and many Excel files for those of you who like the numbers. The legislative language was submitted last Tuesday and is consistent with everything we have explained so far. There are no surprises. However, there are a couple education quality recommendations included that we have not yet discussed. One is related to making kindergarten compulsory, and this came through as a recommendation from the pre-K education and and the other is increasing the number of instructional days to be on par with other states. I would like to highlight a couple areas where there have been some misconceptions about the plan. First, related to the foundation formula. The state must ensure that the money provided to our schools and students supports a high quality education. That is why we adopted the evidence-based approach and made adjustments to the Vermont context. The per pupil amount, however, is not prescriptive. We would expect and would encourage districts to develop budgets that meet the unique needs of students and their communities. Related to community engagement, I understand that the regional school board structure feels very different. However, the proposal creates many opportunities for community engagement and more local involvement at the school level to support students' achievement. Related to school choice, I think school choice may be the most complex area of the plan and the least well understood. This proposal does not dramatically expand choice, but rather manages choice in a way that strengthens public schools and promotes equity. The plan eliminates non-operating districts, eliminates Vermont's practice of sending tuition out of state, reduces the number of independent and private schools receiving public dollars, and establishes shared accountability. Related to school closures, the plan allows flexibility to maintain small schools. Simply put, if a small school is financially viable and can meet education quality expectations within the foundation formula, no changes would be expected. Any discussion around school consolidation would need to involve the community and would take a longer period of time. Our modeling that we have done for the 2027-28 school year assumes the same school portfolio. Regarding the timeline, we have to acknowledge that this plan will impact generational change. It is fundamentally transforming our system to better support students. It will take time. The roadmap laid out identifies key milestones. The most critical challenges are shifting, or the most critical changes are shifting to the new funding formula and governance structure. We have built in a 2-year timeframe to make this transition, but that does not represent the end of the planning to really achieve the future vision of education in Vermont. Related to cost savings, this plan does achieve cost savings by moving to a more efficient system. It will require the state to fund and deliver education differently, and we expect that significant support will be needed related to strategic budgeting and educational planning, which has been built into the overall transition plan and is part of the governor's proposal to increase the capacity of the Agency of Education during this time. This plan ensures that students living in a rural community get the same opportunities as students living in a bigger town. And the student with additional needs gets more support. In this plan, teachers across the state earn a competitive wage. Principals can focus on being instructional leaders, and superintendents have more resources and expertise to draw from to support their schools, teachers, and students. This plan also creates an educational planning system that's more transparent, predictable, and affordable. When the governor positioned this proposal, it also came with a call to action to collaborate. We think this is a good plan, but we recognize this is also a starting point. We want to hear constructive feedback around ways to make this plan better so we can achieve all of our shared goals. We hope that today we provide a little bit more clarity as we walk through the legislative language around the intent and some of the mechanics of how we implement this plan. And we welcome the questions and the ongoing collaboration to ensure that we can collectively build stronger schools, support our students, while building vibrant communities. And so with that, I will transition to Emily Simmons, who will walk through the specific sections of the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm walking through the bill. I'm sure you've noticed that I'm not legislative counsel. So we have a little bit different procedure, nothing wrong with it. Would you like me to share my screen, or are you all preferring to follow along on your own screens?
I think it would be helpful if you would share on your screen, at least for those who are watching. Oh.
Okay, you should have the bill as I'm seeing it on my screen in front of you. Draft 4.1. This is the same document that's posted online, with the exception that I went through and highlighted the beginning of each section just for my own ease of reference, so we don't get lost on the page.
Emily, to the best of your ability, if you could blow that up a bit, that would be really helpful.
I'll do that, but then I'll lose my place and get too dizzy if I go any closer in. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you.
So here you have the watermark that it is an unedited draft. I think folks are familiar. As far as I know, The draft of Representative Tooth's bill that we're looking at is with the editors as far as where it is in the legislative process. So just to dig in, we're going to go through 176 pages together. So thank you for your patience. Here we go. So we have the statement of the bill, which is to transform Vermont's education governance, quality, and finance systems. It would create 5 school districts to govern the public education system for the entire state, each governed by a school board and operated by a central office. The bill also proposes to transform Vermont's education finance system to a funding formula with a base amount of $13,200 per student in fiscal year 2025, with additional weights based on student need, school scale, and district sparsity, developed based on an evidence-based model that has been adjusted to the Vermont context. So in section 1, we have findings and a statement of intent. General Assembly would find that first, the study commissioned in 2024, titled An Evidence-Based Approach to Identifying an Adequate Education Spending Level in Vermont by Alan Auden and Lawrence O. Pikus, evaluated Vermont education spending against research-informed best practices. The evidence-based model is designed to identify an array of staffing and resources that high-performing schools need to provide every student with robust opportunities to meet college and career-ready standards. Performing to those standards would substantially improve student achievement and reduce demographic-related performance gaps. Second, the General Assembly would find the evidence-based model represents an adequate model for the level of education funding necessary to improve student achievement. It was developed by experts in education funding with more than 25 years of experience across the United States in determining how to adequately fund schools, meaning providing a level of resources that would enable schools to provide every student with an equal opportunity to learn to high performance standards. The state has a constitutional obligation to ensure that all students are provided a quality education on a reasonably equal basis without regard to town of residence. Doing so will require significant change to the current system of education. The third finding would be Vermont's current funding model equalizes school district ability to raise education taxes, leveling out the distinctions in property wealth among districts. The current funding system does not provide equalized education dollars to districts. The choice to spend or not spend equitable amounts of education funding per student across the state rests with individual districts. Spending patterns demonstrate that many districts do not utilize the tax equalization mechanism to increase spending, even in the districts with the most demonstrated student need. Fourth finding would be Vermont's current school and school district sizes do not align with the evidence-based model and contribute to higher costs that are not fully addressed by the model. In order to assure the model can be implemented in a way that improves education quality, the state must be organized into larger school districts that are responsible for approximately, at minimum, 3,900 students, a population that represents the minimum to achieve efficiency in delivering the evidence-based model. Fifth finding would be, additionally, larger school districts consistent with state-level guidance for school size, average class size, and budgetary priorities must examine the appropriate number of schools for the student population, geography, student need, and community desires of the school district. Sixth finding, the intent of the proposed 5 districts is to charge school boards to represent a diverse set of student and community needs, to promote equitable budgeting and district policies, and to create central offices that provide specialized resources and support for students and teachers in alignment with best practices for teaching and learning. Moving on to section 2. Here we have an amendment to Title 16 in section 43, which is a change to replace supervisory unions with school districts in the duties as serving for an LEA. So here in paragraph B on line 15, you have an instance of that change, and on lines 19 and 20, the same concept. In section 3, you have an amendment to section 212, which currently is the duties of the Secretary of Education. On page 5, starting on line 2, we're adding that the secretary will articulate a long-term strategic vision for all educational services in the state through enactment of the education engagement of the education community, and as exists in current law, execute those policies adopted by the state board. Going down the page, in paragraph 3, we're re-emphasizing, rewording that the secretary would establish through rulemaking, education, and district quality standards to evaluate the quality of instruction and operations in the public schools and school choice schools. Moving on to page 6. On lines 7, 8, and 9, changing the duty to provide clear, transparent, and high quality information to citizens regarding the condition and opportunities within the public education system. On lines 12 through 14, removing outdated language to conform to the new budget model and process. Again, on lines 17 on to the next page through line 2 on page 7, removing outdated language that refers to a facilities planning service in light of more recent policy developments around school construction.
Emily, just a quick clarification there, if I would. If there is no school construction bill enacted, this would probably need to stay. Is that, when you say there's other policy work going on, I assume you're referring to the work we're doing on school construction?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. I don't want to give you totally detailed answers to hypotheticals because I'm hyper-focused on the text here, but yes, that sounds consistent with the intention here.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to move on to page 7. You're going to see elimination of references to supervisory union here in the middle of the page on lines 11 and 12. We're going to keep going to page 8 and cruise right past it to page 9, where we are importing duties that are currently given in statute to the State Board of Education. So on lines 8 through 10, you see regulations governing the attendance and records of attendance of all students, and deportment of students attending the public schools. That's an existing duty. Same for numbered item 24, implement and continually update standards for student performance in appropriate content areas. It goes on with the same wording that exists now for that state board duty in current law, switching it to the secretary.
Would it be fair to say that some of these additional duties to the state board, they currently don't have in their portfolio, but are generally housed more in the agency?
For some, I would say yes. I would caution you to also hear from the state board as to what they're doing and not doing. But yes, in my experience, there are some duties that very just on their face require staff, and the State Board of Education relies on the staff at the Agency of Education to carry out that kind of duty. I happen to know right now, numbered item 24 is work that the State Board of Education undertakes in its current portfolio. On line 19, this is a duty that's currently given to the State Board that we're also amending slightly. Current duty says, if advisable, determine statewide graduation standards, where the proposal here is that the secretary would be required to develop statewide graduation standards. Then number duty 26 is to provide oversight for adult education and literacy programs and to perform all duties and powers prescribed by law pertaining to adult education and literacy, and to serve as the state approval agency for educational institutions conducting programs of adult education and literacy.
Again, that currently resides with the agency, not with the state board. Is that correct?
In practice, yes.
Thank you.
Number 27 is a very lengthy item that's currently a duty of the state board. It also goes into some detail about what the secretary ought to do with that data. So we're moving it fully into the secretary's secretary's responsibilities. This is information about the condition of education statewide, including information on attainment of standards for student performance, number and types of complaints of hazing, harassment, and bullying, financial resources and expenditures, community social indicators, all to be reported and organized in a way that is easily understandable by the general public and that enables each school district, and supervisory union to determine its strengths and weaknesses. Then we have on lines the end of 11 through about 16, disaggregation by student group requirements. The secretary shall use the information in the report to determine whether students in each school district, and supervisory union are provided educational opportunities substantially equal to those provided in other schools, school districts, and supervisory unions pursuant to section 165, which is the education quality standards.
Just to be clear, all of these reports would be the responsibility of the state board.
This text currently appears in the duties of the state board in current law.
In current law.
Yes.
Okay.
Then finally moving one final duty from the state board section to the secretary's duties: ensure Vermont students, including students enrolled in secondary CTE, have access to a substantially equal educational opportunity by developing a system to evaluate the equalizing effects of Vermont's education finance system and education quality standards.
Will there be a spot later in the language that talks about the state board having the resources to be able to do all of these tasks, such as staffing?
No.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
please.
now I'm confused. The language moves this to your charge, but could we go back to the sentence that does that so we can understand how it then interacts with the board? That's top of page 5.
That's just underlined would be the content that has been shifted over to the secretary, and the next section will enumerate those responsibilities of the state board. As for articulating these responsibilities to require central staff to board to do the first.
I apologize. I think I confused
Yes, yes.
because I was confused.
I can confuse myself just fine.
Thank you for, I appreciate you bringing.
I guess I've just been trying to relate it all to the top of page 5, where the language starts articulate a long-term strategic vision through engagement of the education community, shall execute those policies adopted by the state board. So I would still imagine anything here would be a policy adopted by the state board that you would then execute.
No. These are the duties of the secretary, and I'll call your attention to the language on page 5, line 5, that's existing law, and shall. So they're transitioning from the concept of among other duties, like establish a vision. The secretary shall execute policies adopted by the state board, and also this list of things over the next several pages.
And all of these things existed under the duties of the Board of Education and are shifting to you. Some are new. Maybe I lost.
Yeah, where indicated by underline, they would be new duties of the secretary that were not prior duties of the secretary as a function of current law. And I'm indicating in my comments where those are shifted as is from duties that are in current law given to the state board rather than the secretary. And I think this will make more sense when we're done with the state board section, because you'll see the corresponding cross out there.
Thank you. I just want to apologize. I had it backwards. And I think that probably confused me and other people. I apologize for that.
So I'm going to leave section 212. which is amending the secretary's duties, and go on to the following section, which is amending the duties of the State Board of Education. So we're going to go back to page.
Rob, go ahead.
So I could have missed it, but I don't see anything about the physical plant or deferred maintenance or school buildings. Is that one of your responsibilities?
So that would be, that's what, the chair had asked for.
Okay.
So we just say,
So it's in here?
so it is not in here.
Okay.
All right, Emily, I think, are we up to section 4 then?
We're on section 4, which is on page 11, and is amending section 164 in current law, which provides the duties of the State Board of Education. So here we're indicated by cross out on lines 8 and 9. We're removing the reference to and the broader education community. And on line 10, removing the reference to establish and regularly update, which refers to the long-term strategic vision. So here you see that the state board, under this proposal, will engage local school board members and, consistent with the provisions of this title, its own rules and rules adopted by the secretary, contribute to a long-term strategic vision articulated by the Secretary of Education for the delivery of educational services in Vermont, and act in accordance with legislative mandates, including the executing special assignments. In addition to these duties, the board shall, and we're going to go through the changes in the numbered list below. So on page 12, lines 8 through 10, you see a cross out. That language that's crossed out there was placed into the secretary's duties that we just went over above. The same goes for the language in lines 15 through 20 on this page. I'll call your attention again to lines 4 and 5. I went over this above. To the secretary's duties, we added determine educational standards for admission to and graduation from the public schools, but we have not added the language if deemed advisable, because the recommendation is that that should be a mandatory duty in this case of the secretary, because we've shifted it. Is that more clear? I feel like this is a good test of whether we're on the same page now. So on lines 7 through 10 is the item referring to adult education that has been shifted to the secretary's duties. On line 11, we are striking the reference to adopting rules for the approval of independent schools. As we'll see later in the bill, there's a different policy construct related to that topic. So that's not been added to the duties of secretaries. It's been repealed here. In lines 12 through 14, that's an item that's been moved to the secretary. Lines 15 through the next page, page 14, line 2, we're striking this language. It's not been moved elsewhere. This refers to aiding districts in making technology and telecommunications available. We view this as outdated language. And the concepts are covered in other work by the Agency of Education. Let's see, I'm still on page 14. I'll just refer to numbered item 17 because, again, this is a fairly lengthy paragraph. This is language that we saw above has been added to the secretary's duties as is in current law. We've shifted it and moved it. The same goes for numbered item 18 that you'll see on page 15, lines 1 through 5. That's a shift to the secretary. And then we're going to begin with new duties that do not exist in current law that we're proposing be assigned to the State Board of Education, starting on this page, page 15, with line 12. So clarifying language that the board as now will report to the Governor and General Assembly on the progress the board has made in the execution of its enumerated duties. Numbered item 22, this is new, that the board would administer a statewide contract to provide annual training to school board members on educational leadership and the roles and responsibilities of the school district board. The state board will select an appropriate training vendor to speak to the Vermont context and to be informed by research-based best practices. On page 16, numbered item 23, lines 1 through 3 is another new proposed duty to annually review each school district's adopted equity budget policy and coordinate with school districts on the content and implementation considerations for those policies.
We have a definition of equity budget policy someplace.
We don't, and we don't define the term in the bill. However, just for folks' general orientation to the concept, this is the same equity budget policy that's been mentioned in the policy briefs. Secretary Saunders, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that concept. It's the first place it appears in the draft bill.
So this policy is making sure that within the district, we are providing resources to the students that need it most. We're looking at references of how we also manage federal dollars and proportion share. And there would be guardrails around that, ensuring that the state can evaluate that every district is approaching their budgeting from an equity-based, student-centered approach.
Should we assume that each school district's adopted equity budget policy, much like we do today, where the AOE comes up with model policy, that would be a model policy that the AOE would generate?
Sure.
Okay, and then wrapping up duties of the state board on page 16, numbered item 24, also new proposed duty here, annually review the outcome of the district quality standards evaluation of each of school board proficiency published by the Agency of Education. The state board shall convene public discussions with each school district to identify areas for improvement and define the roles of the school board in improving district-wide practices. Okay, we're going to move on to section 5. Some amendments to existing law in section 165, which are the education quality standards requirements. So I'm going to take us to page 17. No, I'm not. There's no change on page 17. Going on to page 18. On line 17 and line 18, this is the proposal to change responsibility for the education quality standards rules from the State Board of Education to the Agency of Education.
So just, I want to make sure I heard you clearly. This would shift education quality standards rulemaking from the state board to the agency.
Yes.
Yep. And then there was a reference previously to district quality standards being evaluated by the state board. But district quality standards rulemaking currently rests within the agency. That's right?
The reference above was to evaluating particular outcomes
Yep.
of the review process and district quality standards. So to be clear, the proposal is that the agency would retain the district quality standards as well. Okay, so here I want to orient you to kind of what section 165 does. It directs currently the State Board of Education to adopt education quality standards. It says that the standards shall address those aspects of the following that are most closely associated with improving student performance. So we're making some additions to this list in existing law of what those standards need to cover. So here on page 19, whereas current law requires the standards to cover school leadership and staffing, we're adding average minimum class sizes to the list and then retaining support services. And the detail added here is the standards governing average minimum class size shall require that for grades 4 through 12, average class sizes be equivalent to teacher to student ratio of 1 to 25. And for grades kindergarten through 3 shall be equivalent to teacher to student ratios of 15 to 1.
We may need a little more specificity as to licensed classroom teacher versus maybe there's another speech language pathologist teacher and there was some other, just to make clear. And at the end, as just a policy question, I might understand why you chose ratios rather than numbers of students in each class, but we'll stick with just the clarifications for now.
It's based on how the funding formula was developed and the assumptions that are built.
Sure. And for folks' context, I'm sure that this will be more important to conversations potentially later on. But here is what I would call a delegation to rulemaking. So in statute, the General Assembly has laid out these minimum standards for each content area of these standards. The rule as it exists now and is intended to exist in the future does go into further detail determined through the rulemaking process. So the next change is a conforming change with the concept we discussed already to have these be rules of the Agency of Education and standards adopted by the Agency of Education. That's 14. We get all the way to page 21 to find a conforming change to delete supervisory union boundaries. The same on line 6.
Just a second here. I'm just going to read this. State board adjust responsibility. Okay, thank you. I need a second to catch up.
On lines 8 through 11, there's a change that's conforming to a concept we haven't reached yet in walking through the bill, but it relates to the shift that the bill makes from the current tuition and operating structure to the 5-district model where every district is an operating district. So that's the conforming change and the language you see on line 10 and line 11. And then we'll get to page 22. Starting on line 13, which is subsection F, we are repealing the concept of an independent school that's determined to meet education quality standards and the associated process of determining that status. As you'll see in crossouts to come down the road in our session together, we are proposing a different construct for determining how much funding goes to an independent school, simplifying that. And so we're recommending that we do not retain the ability of an independent school to be designated as meeting education quality standards. I think I'll explain that construct in current law, even though it doesn't appear here, because I'm afraid of losing the thread on that on later pages. The short version of this explanation is that currently, if a school meets the requirements in this struck out language, section F, and is an independent school meeting education quality standards, they get an exception to our rules about the amount of tuition that is paid to an independent school, and they can be paid the full tuition that they charge. So no tuition caps on a school meeting these criteria. So that's what we're getting rid of with the crossouts on lines 13 through 21 and going over onto page 23 through line 4. I think that will become much more clear very soon because we're going to section 166 next, but pausing. Okay, so section 6. It's amendment to section 166 in current law, which is the rules for approved and recognized independent schools. making a change to govern independent schools serving as school choice schools for grades 9 through 12 here.
A quick clarification, just it probably gets into detail later, but this to me says that school choice schools are only grades 9 through 12.
That's right.
Okay. So a result of that would be that we would no longer have independent schools for lower grades that would be receiving tuition. They would not be school choice schools. They would all be public schools.
That's correct. And
Okay.
yeah, this was something we'll get to in the 821 section that'll come later.
Thank you.
Sure. So here we have amendments to existing law in section 166. So the first big instance of that starts on line 19. It's where we're striking the process where the state board approves an independent school as an approved independent school. That's quite a bit of language here. It's a current process that I think the committees are fairly familiar with from testimony so far this year. It's the goes through page 25. Lines 11 and 12 are kind of the end of that block of cross-through language. So here on line 13, we're taking a requirement that applies to approved independent schools now and making that a requirement for recognized independent schools. That's the requirement to provide to a parent or guardian responsible for each of its students prior to accepting any money for a student an accurate statement of its status as either an approved or recognized independent school. Recognized independent schools, as you'll see later in this section, are those schools where a student is attending and satisfying compulsory attendance requirements. The student is not truant. There's not public funding of the student's attendance by any school district to attend that recognized independent school. On line 19, we begin in the first language of the school choice schools construct. So each school choice school designated by a school district shall provide to the secretary on October 1st of each school year the names, genders, birth dates, and addresses of its enrolled students.
Can I hold you there? The term designation is a construct and a legal term we use now. Is this meant to use that? Was that a chosen word here to bring in all sort of the definitions of designation as we have them today?
I think you're referring to the terms of section 827. A process really in section 827, and in that case, no, we're not using the same process that's in that section in current law. It's a word that describes a school district action.
Okay, so there's no connection between the use of the word designated here and the designation process that we have.
There may be similarities. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're not bringing in and cross-referencing section 827 here.
There's it's a different process too.
Right, and I'm just saying that we've got the word designated is filled with lots of baggage or
Okay.
detail. And if it's not meant to be having that detail, I would recommend a different word.
Whatever word helps folks be clear on the concepts that we haven't gone over yet, just for those following along. We haven't gotten there yet. So we're gonna have to get through some more strike through language. We're on page 26, starting with line 5. We're striking out the current process under the state board's duties to revoke approval status as it currently exists in Title 16. More strike through language in subdivision 6 that refers to distance learning programs. Retaining current law until line 13, which again is describing activity that would cause an independent school to lose the current law status of approved independent school. And that goes all the way through page 29 and ends at the bottom of page 29, which brings us to page 30 with the text of the proposed requirements. So starting on line 1, an independent school may be designated as a school choice school to serve grades 9 through 12 by the school district in which it is geographically located. In order to be eligible for designation, an independent school shall be certified by the Agency of Education as meeting the following criteria. First, that the school would use state standardized assessment. Second, that it would implement minimum state graduation requirements. Third, that it would provide special education services to all enrolled students to the same extent as would be required of a public school operated by a school district. Fourth, that it would complete an annual single audit by a certified public accountant and submit that to the Agency of Education. Fifth, that it would maintain minimum financial reserves in an amount to be established by rule of the AOE. Sixth, that it would comply with school choice school requirements of the education quality standards to be defined by the Secretary of Education through rulemaking. Seventh, that it would comply with school safety requirements in Chapter 33 of current law. Eighth, that it adheres to all policies and in all of its policies and operations with non-discrimination requirements. That's the Public Accommodations Act, Title IX, Chapter 139. We're now on the top of page 31, line 1, that the school has adopted harassment, hazing, and bullying prevention policies required by Title 16 current law, except that the board shall follow its own procedures for adopting the policy. That's the text of current law. Line 4, item 10, that the school annually announces a capacity for incoming students to attend on a publicly funded basis in the following school year. 11, the school was an approved independent school on July 1st, 2025. 12, that the school's enrollment is at least 51% comprised of students attending on a district-funded tuition basis as of the same date, July 1, 2025. 13, on line 9, the school has a policy to govern a non-discriminatory lottery system for determining which students may enroll in the school on a publicly funded basis when student interest exceeds capacity. Number 14, the school offers due process protections prior to suspending or expelling a student attending on a publicly funded basis that are at least as comprehensive as those required of public schools in Section 1162, which is current law. We're not proposing to amend that either.
Maybe I'm getting ahead, but do the class size or teacher-student ratios apply the same?
Through operation of, let me find the section that refers to education quality standards. Yes.
So school choice schools, both independent and public, would have to comply with the education quality for choice schools.
It would be different education quality standards, so for school choice schools than public
Those would be
schools.
done through rulemaking, and that's hopefully be consistent to the outcomes with flexibility for operations, like the extent of the school day or.
I just wanted, that seems like a huge concept and so make sure I have it clear. So the education quality standards would be different for your standard public school versus school choice schools.
There would be operational flexibility.
So,
Hang on a second. If you were still answering that question, go ahead. Sorry.
I am. I didn't have it right at hand, so I wanted to point out that's on lines 15 and 16 on page 30, the language that I just went through. And I think the call out here is that there are not currently requirements for school choice schools because there's not a concept that exists in current law within the education quality standards. So this is calling out that needs to be an addition to the current education quality standards through new rulemaking.
And I apologize for fixating, but you do say in order to be eligible for designation, and I assume you do not mean designation as it currently exists in state statute. Now, this is line 3, top of page 30.
Right, we use that word, I mean, I think this is a different process than section 827. These are requirements that a school has to meet as a predicate to receiving designation as a school choice school by a school district.
Okay, so unrelated. Could you just, in a lot of the stuff you scratched out above, I think it talked a lot about sort of the currently existing financial and other reporting requirements of an independent school. And that seems to change into now it is just an annual audit.
So what currently exists, I'm going to go up to it if you'll give me a moment to get to the beginning.
Or maybe the question is what
Is it
is
correct?
currently required of an independent school versus what's being required here?
Sure. So what is represented here? What page are we on? Page 27, starting with line 13. This is crossed out language. Currently, this is sometimes called the financial trigger language. It's a list of events that if they occur, an approved independent school has an obligation to notify the AOE and the state board that those events have occurred. And then, so you see them start on line 17, the school's failure to file its federal or state tax returns when due, the school's failure to meet payroll, failure to meet required retirement contributions, use of designated funds for non-designated purposes, and the inability to comply with any financial terms of debt obligations. Oh, and sorry, there's one more, withdrawal or conditioning of the school's accreditation on financial grounds by an accreditor. The actions that happen then is, I can summarize all this as an investigation by the Agency of Education that could result in recommendations to the state board to take action against the school's approval status. So a couple of things going on there. One, they are not reporting requirements. They are contingencies that if a certain event happens, then a report must be generated. The second is the process all ends with action against the approval status. And this proposal is not carrying forward the concept of approved independent schools. And so that's not a status that would exist that could be taken away under this model.
Okay, but these are potentially, I realize a school choice school could be a public school, but it also could be an independent school.
And in this section, these are requirements for independent schools specifically that we're looking at in this list on page 30. So what's new, to get to your question that you first mentioned, is to complete a single audit and to submit that to the Agency of Education, which is an annual proactive reporting requirement that's replacing the current system of triggers that are generally related to financial failure after the fact.
Okay,
I had a quick question.
yeah, Representative Brown.
Can I ask a quick question about the, so on page 31, line 6, so in order to be a school choice school, a school has to be an approved independent school as of July 1st, 2025. I'm just wondering, what's the sort of daylight between when the current moratorium was implemented and July 1st, 2025? Is there some number of schools that are sort of in that gap? I'm just curious why we chose, or why the bill chooses July 1st, 2025.
I thought you probably would have adjourned by then, and it would be a safe date to pick to signal the time when this bill was passed.
A lot of laughs on that one.
But that's the intent here, is just at the time of passage, fair enough that we, that's a knowable fact, the list of approved independent schools as of a date certain. And the intent is that a school choice school would have to be on that list as of that date certain.
Are we leaving this page?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I had a question about the next line item. The school's enrollment is at least 51% students attending on a district-funded tuition basis. I don't even know where to begin. Is that what a current designation that we have? What is or picked from? Is that, it sounds like it's mostly saying that's a public school.
So as part of shared accountability, it's important to have a certain size school to be able to have that advantage. So. It's not a current construct.
So at least 51% of the students in this school choice school are going with public tuition dollars.
This is saying to be eligible to be a school choice.
Okay.
But as of this, so you'd want, the intent is to choose the same date certain as item 11. So as of that same date, the data, which the agency has, reflects that the school's enrollment as of that date was at least 51% publicly funded. So it's a point in time analysis.
I think I had this question before in committee. I still don't quite understand what a school choice school is. So maybe I'll ask it a different way. What if they are using their tuition dollars to receive some kind of special form of education? Would that school be another type of choice school?
Are you referring to a therapeutic school?
Maybe. I guess this.
Therapeutic schools would be a separate.
Okay, so is this a certain number of schools right now that we're aware of in the state? I just,
Yes.
how many?
Oh, I don't have that in front of me. We have,
Is it like less than 10?
it's a definite number that's known as of at least today's date, or not today's date, that's wrong. Our data is a year old. So last year, yes, this would have to be the subject of further examination, presentation of data, and discussion.
Totally, would
Right.
be. Yeah.
It's not the
Well,
intent to be a mystery, that's for sure.
Okay,
What it basically says, to say it in reverse, is
Yeah.
that if you only have a few publicly tuitioned students in your independent school, you would not qualify to be a school choice school,
okay. Would you qualify to be something else?
a recognized independent school.
Okay,
This section is just around the eligibility to be a school choice. You probably will find it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought I had one question, but I now have two based on something you just said. So you said it would qualify to be a recognized independent school and for the school choice school. But in this model, don't we only have school choice schools now, not like recognized independent?
So recognized independent school can accept private paid tuition. This is just related to.
Okay,
We already have recognized schools there. They just simply accept private tuition, period.
right, but would they now have to be a school choice school to accept our public tuition?
Recognized schools do not receive public tuition.
Okay, I guess I'm, all right.
Just for attendance, right? They're just for attendance.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then my second question is, I'm looking at this 51% and I'm wondering, it seems like that would either, I guess my question is, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like that would either mean they would have to be a really small private school to get up to 51% public schools, or we're actually encouraging our private schools to really go out and target public schools in order to be a school choice school to meet that threshold.
So the eligibility is based on current enrollment as a passage of the bill.
Yeah.
And then, as we talked about in this proposal, it's about building stronger schools, it's a focus on strengthening schools, to be making them that important for overall accountability. So establishing a threshold of the number of publicly tuition students would be important to evaluate outcomes for the student population.
Right, but wouldn't that mean a large amount of public school kids going to that private school to get it over the 51%?
I think what this says is that if you are wanting to be a school choice school,
Mm-hmm.
that you need to be a school that on July 1st, 2025 has at least 51% of your students there on a tuition amount. So if you are, for example, Vermont Academy, which is mostly private pay students, you would qualify.
Okay.
But if you were Burton, which is 80+%,
Okay.
That was my sort of clarifying question as well, that school choice school, district will decide how many school choice schools they have, if I understand. So if you're basically where was the Jean-Claude King school, you know, if only one or two of your students in the district want to go to that school, it's not gonna be an option. It's not gonna be a school choice school because it's not enough public.
doesn't qualify to be one, yeah. Okay, I think they could be able to go ahead.
Okay. So we were on page 31, roundabout line 15 here. I'll just point out because it was a question. This is existing law that's not being amended for how to become a recognized independent school. That goes on through page 32 at least. And page 33. On page 34, we have some changes. So on line 13 is where I'm headed. Is there a question?
Nope, just coughing.
I was doing that too a second ago, not sure if you saw. So on line 13, a student would be truant unless absent with full excuse or enrolled in a public school, a recognized independent school, or a home study program. That's a conforming change. On to page 35, beginning with line 8, you see the language creating the Council of Independent Schools. The council would be repealed through line 20. Then on to line page 36, we have some more conforming changes. So this still, just to be very clear, also a recognized independent school also must have harassment and hazing and bullying policies. That's the same as in current law. Then on line 8, a conforming change about tuition payment. And the same with line 13, item G, tuition assessments. You'll see above that we have a requirement that a school choice school administer the state assessment. So that makes item G redundant. Okay, so moving on to section 7, we're going to have a study. So page 37. The Agency of Education shall convene superintendents, directors of therapeutic independent schools, special education directors, and other experts in the opinion of the agency to study the need for cooperative education services and the oversight of therapeutic schools within the governance framework created by this act. The agency will be required to submit a summary of its findings and recommended legislative language to the Committees on Education in the House and the Senate on or before December 15th, 2025. The agency shall also submit recommendations for legislative language to implement a statewide salary schedule with its report. We're still on page 37 with section 8. This is section 241 is in the chapter on superintendents and supervisory unions. So on line 7, we're deleting the word may and making this activity mandatory that each supervisory union board with the advice of the secretary shall employ a superintendent of schools.
So we're still using the term supervisory union?
This should be caught by editing. That should be a school board. I apologize. Thank you. We're going to go to the bottom of the page on line 21 and delete some language that corresponds to what happens if or if not a supervisory union employs a superintendent, because we're making that a mandatory employee. Section 9, amending the duties of superintendents. These are conforming changes which should catch every instance of supervisory union so that a superintendent is the employee of a school district in every case. So you'll see those conforming changes throughout. There's not anything else happening on page 39 through line 14. Those are conforming changes to go from supervisory unions to school districts. Starting with line 15, this is an item in current law that details how to make a supervisory union budget that would no longer be necessary. Page 40, numbered item 5, again, conforming changes, references to member districts of supervisory unions now. And the current practice of that some policies are a supervisory union policy and some are a district policy. In the new construct, the district would hold all policies for the district. Going on to section 10, this would be a repeal.
Actually, if I could just clarify something, I asked it earlier. And I think there said there was gonna be some more detail, but just to be clear, back to the school choice school issue, school choice schools are strictly 9 through 12 in this proposal. Is that correct? All right, thank you.
Section 10 is a repeal of the current law chapter that deals with supervisory unions. That effective date is July 1, 2027. Section 11 is where you get what's going to happen instead on July 1, 2027. So section 11, new union school districts. Line 15, the Vermont school districts and supervisory unions then in effect, which shall be dissolved on July 1, 2027 and succeeded by 5 unified union school districts. Not later than 30 days following the enactment of this section, the Secretary of Education shall certify the designation of the newly created school districts pursuant to section 713 of Title 16. Section 12 gives the membership, really beginning on page 41, the membership of the proposed 5 unified union school districts. So as of July 1, 2027, you would have in paragraph 1, the current districts that would be constituted as the Winooski Valley Unified Union School District. Continuing on with paragraph 2, the same for the Southwest Vermont Unified Union School District. And all of these, I think folks are aware, all of these have been represented by the maps included in our policy proposals.
Emily, is there any reason why you listed this by school district and supervisory union rather than just town, since towns make up each of these units?
Yes, we want to very clearly constitute the new districts along the boundaries of the forming districts so that in every case, the current law or current day school districts are held together and not divided in any case. And you don't automatically take the same action by naming towns. We have the list of towns as a reference material, so if anyone needs to look at the list of each town that corresponds to each of the proposed districts, we have that.
Would the effect be the same, or is that unknown? In other words, I guess, are there towns that are split?
I believe there are, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I said paragraph 3 is the Southwest Vermont UUSD. Paragraph 4 is the Northwest Vermont UUSD. Paragraph 5 goes over onto page 42, with the Champlain Valley UUSD. I'll note, and this is kind of here for reader assistance. I believe that editors will remove the text on line 4 because there is a section on effective dates as you're accustomed to. The existence of the identity, I think I will say the identity of the new school districts becomes effective on passage. As you'll see in subsequent sections, they have transition duties that take place in between, so in the transition years, in between passage and the first date of operation, July 1, 2027.
We have a question, Representative Brady?
Yeah, I'm just curious where the 5 new districts, where these boundaries and subsets of districts and union, and supervisory unions derive from, and why one is significantly, obviously, the Champlain Valley region is so much larger than the others.
I'm going to ask for that to be at the end, since that's more of a policy question than a clarification. But save that, please.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to section 13. We're on page 42, starting with line 6. This is amending current law stating the powers of school boards, the duties of school boards. So changes don't begin, until page 43 with line 20. This is reflecting changes we've discussed above, that accounting and reporting procedures would be established by the Agency of Education. On page 44, with line 16, paragraph 10 describes current activity involved in warning a budget to the electorate. In the proposal, the budgets are adopted by the school board, not warned to the electorate. So we're deleting that language here and in several other instances in this section. On page 45, starting with line 6, you see a reflection of the same concept I just mentioned, that the school board prepares and publishes annually a proposed budget for the next school year according to such major categories as may from time to time be prescribed by the secretary. The board shall hold no fewer than 2 informational meetings at which the public can comment on the proposed budget. That's a change in process.
Quick question while you're scanning through there. If we move to 5 districts, that means a significant reduction in central office staffing. That's frankly one of the goals here, which I see, obviously. But like, who's in charge of buying out contracts? If you've got a superintendent who's losing his job with a multi-year contract, or a curriculum leader, or a SWEB leader, and they're losing their job, which entity is in charge of negotiating all of that?
We're going to get to some sections on the transition. They're coming, I promise.
Okay, thank you.
In the great level of detail. So please remind me of your question if it doesn't get answered when we're there. And actually, I have a little bit of a cheat sheet. I will tell you that's coming in section 14. So we're almost there. This, on page 46, I'm showing language that's being struck that dictates our current budget approval process. So that's the case all the way through page 47, line 3. Then we have existing law on page 47 through page 48. Here on page 48, line 17, again, we have a reflection of a change from rules that currently belong to the state board that would then belong to the Agency of Education for home study students. On line 20, we have a strikeout referring to the current law practice of school districts that operate versus tuition. So that's becomes an outdated concept in the proposal. Page 49, another change in duties to the agency that you've seen reflected above. We're on page 50. Starting with line 16, This is a duty that is currently given to supervisory union boards that will be given instead to the new school district boards. So you've seen this language struck out in earlier pages. It's coming back to life here in numbered item 33, 34, all the way through the rest of page 51 and 52 to the end of the section. These are current, I can go through them if you'd like. They do reflect the language in current law, and they're simply being shifted to this section to be school board duties rather than supervisory union board duties.
Thank you. You don't need to go through them.
Okay, so here is the transition language that I promised. Starting on page 52, line 11. Let me explain the overall view. We have sections in chapter 11 from section 702 all the way through 715 appearing here in section 14 of the bill. So as far as sections in Title 16 are going to be many, it's many provisions of chapter 11 that we're amending to suit the purpose of transitioning to the 5-district model. So first up, you have the definition section. Again, we're retaining section 702, except as to the language that appears here. Notice the stars. I'm sure Beth would have a more clear way to call this out to you. In the definition of forming districts in current law, we're adding the concept or districts that are named by the General Assembly to be merged into a new union school district on July 1, 2027. So in other words, as an effect of the act that would be created by passage of the bill we're looking at. On page 53, one new definition to that same definition section in current law, that a new union school district shall refer to a school district created by the General Assembly pursuant to this same act, which shall assume operations on July 1, 2027.
Emily, having spent a lot of time in this part of it, the other chapter 11 a couple of years ago, chapter 11 is all about voluntary formation of union school districts. And this, and what is being proposed here is really a forced consolidation of school districts. Would most of chapter 11 just simply go away because of that? Since there's no longer any of these study committees or anything like that?
That's right. So there are probably more elegant ways to present the same concepts in drafted language. This is the one that we're showing you today. You're going to see a lot of strike through in chapter 11. So as promised, on page 53, starting with line 8, we have current law section 706 just being replaced by new language that will govern the attendance in academic year 2027-2028, which is the first year of full operations of the new districts. So we'll have to go through the struck language to get to the new proposed language. That will take us to page 57. Beginning on line 9. In academic year 27-28, each student in the new union school district will attend the school that a student residing in that town would have attended in academic year 26-27, so the year before, provided, however, that the superintendent may grant a parent's or guardian's request for student enrollment in a different school operated by the new district, based on individual student circumstances and the superintendent's determination of the school's capacity to serve the child. Additionally, the superintendent may adjust student attendance locations to respond to unforeseen circumstances, such as facilities failures. So this is how you know where kids go to school the first year of the new districts. We've been referring throughout the policy brief process to assignment of schools or attendance zones. This is the language to represent part of that concept. Replacing the language in current law, section 707, will be language about transition finances. So again, going through the cross out of that current law, you get to page 59, line 13. Indebtedness including capital debt. The new union district shall assume all indebtedness that may exist on June 30th, 2027, including capital debt and including both principal and interest of the forming districts.
Oh, question?
So many questions. I think some of them are pretty basic. Is forming district a defined, is that defined somewhere? All of a sudden now
Yes.
we have forming districts. Where was it?
It is, I'm sorry, you did not see that language appear in the bill because it is unamended as in current law for definitions in chapter 11. Yeah, it is a defined term.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see a definition in this language of a forming district. So that's an existing
Yeah.
construct. Okay.
Page 52, forming districts means all school districts. They're located.
Page 52. Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
It's confusing for some.
Yeah. I got stuck very far back in the ratios, actually. So like 1 teacher to 25 students and then 1 teacher to 15 students in grades K through 3. Are we does that merge with this at some place? Is that a requirement by some year?
Yes.
Okay, where is that stated?
The expectation would be those requirements would come to effect in the 2027 school year.
2026. That
1.7.
that you would have students.
Yeah, like,
Okay. Isn't that next year? Like,
yeah.
it's the year after next? What year are we in?
25.
Okay, so
26, we get it all
The
together.
coming school year is 25, 26. School year after that would be.
26, we'll have it all decided. 27, it'll start being implemented.
so the ratios would not take effect in the next school year if we pass this. Not in the fall of 2026, but in the
No, in the fall of 2020.
fall of 2027.
Fall,
Fall of 2026. Isn't that the next school year?
no.
Am I losing my
Fall of
mind?
2025 is the next school year.
Oh,
I
okay.
think we go between school years and fiscal years.
Okay. Okay, so a year and a half. Okay. Okay. That might be it for now, for me.
All right, back to reserve funds and debt.
No, operating fund surpluses. I scrolled without you watching. Okay, so page 60, line 6. Operating fund surpluses. The new union district shall assume all operating surpluses, deficits, and fund balances for the forming districts that may exist at the close of business on June 30th, 2027. So the last day before the first day of operation.
We got a question? Representative Brady?
I think this is back on the language on page 59. I assume there's no new, so a community that has already voted a bond, perhaps a significant one, that will just get picked up by the new district. And if any new large bonds happen in the interim between now and this future state, those would just automatically be subsumed in the new district. Those folks wouldn't re-vote on that bond. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We will use, we request to do an analysis on that. The districts.
Senator Weeks.
Related to Representative Brady's question, what's to prevent an explosion of bonds or expenditures in the next 2 years?
So I think if that's a concern that you all took up, one strategy, not saying it's the only, is to look at on line 14, that date. And to say that the ones that exist as of a certain date count. However, that will raise additional questions of who assumes the debt of the gap year bonds. So this is assuming that everything that the forming districts come in with on day one becomes a obligation of the new district. I'm not saying that's the only way to address it, just pointing out the function of this date and how it works here. So I think we're going on to page 61. Line 3, the new union district shall apply any reserve fund for the fund specific purpose if identified unless otherwise determined through appropriate legal procedures. Line 8, transfer of debt and funds. The forming districts shall transfer the debt and funds specified in this article to the new union school district on or before June 30th, 2027 in accordance with procedures and timelines established by the new union district board. Going all the way to page 64. Current law, section 708 is being struck and replaced by provisions relating to real and personal property that you'll find beginning on page 65, line 10. No later than June 30th, 2027, the forming district shall convey to the new union district with the sum of $1 and other good and valuable consideration, subject to the encumbrances of record, all other school-related real and personal property, including all land, buildings, and contents. This is their property. Going on to page 67. Line 7, subsequent sale of real property to the town in which it is located in any year in the future. Subject to any provision of law relating to duties of the new union district and to the sale of buildings in this title or any other title of the Vermont statutes, if the new union district board determines in its discretion that the real property, including land and buildings, conveyed to it by one or more of the forming districts will not be used for direct delivery of education in at least one grade or for any other purpose related to operation of the new union district, then the new union district shall offer for sale such real property to the town in which the real property is located for the sum of $1, subject to all encumbrances of record, the assumption of payment of all outstanding bonds and notes, and the repayment of any school construction aid or grants required by Vermont law. That conveyance of any of the above such property shall be conditioned on the town owning and using the real property for community and public purposes for a minimum of 5 years.
Emily, was a lot of this language based on what we went through with Act 46?
This was based on language, yes, and specifically this was based on language in the articles of agreement that were included in the state board's final order, merging districts non-voluntarily.
I might suggest that we kind of move ahead to the employees and contracts, since a lot of this has been done in the past and it's pretty specific and understandable.
Okay.
Just for the sake of time.
Okay, so that gets us to section 709, which I think I'm coming up on here any page now. Yep. So this is transportation employees and contracts in academic year 2027-2028. The language you're going to see also is taken from the articles of agreement that Chair Conlon and I just summarized. So in academic year 27-28, the new union district shall provide for the transportation of students, assignment of staff, and implementation of curriculum in a manner that is consistent with the contracts, collective bargaining agreements, and provisions of law that are in effect during that academic year.
That's good.
Page 23.
I have a quick question here.
I'm just looking at the line assignments of staff and thinking about the districts that you laid out in which schools. Some of them are kind of far away from where people are right now. So like if someone, worked in Orleans Southwest, like I do. I live in Glover, right? Now Montpelier is in my district. You're saying that someone who came from way north to work in that district could now be assigned by their district all the way some place in Montpelier because it's now in the same district.
So I think your question is answered by the language that I scrolled to on page 73, line 2, which is going to say that the new district needs to negotiate with staff pursuant to our current law on collective bargaining to reach new contracts, just to like give you the plain language summary of what's on the page right now.
So in
So
other words,
that's subject to negotiation.
subject to negotiation. And also keep in mind within the districts, there are attendance zones, right? So there's an understanding of that there are different clusters of schools within that.
Right, but they could do that if they wanted to, is assign someone way to the other end of the district to a completely unattainable, I guess that's subjective.
It all depends on what's in your collective bargaining agreement. That could be the
Okay.
answer.
All right.
So I think it's important to point out the last sentence of this language on page 73. So that's at the end of line 7. This is, again, similar to concepts that the state has already employed through past articles of agreement. In the absence of new collective bargaining agreements on the first date of operation, the new union district shall comply with pre-existing master agreements that have been negotiated. So you try to get new ones. If not, you default to the existing agreements.
So I'll go back to my question. Non-union employees such as superintendents, people with multi-year contracts who might be losing their job, and generally that requires a significant contract payout. Who's financially responsible for meeting that obligation?
Scroll to this section of it. So that would be caught by the reference to contracts generally here. So the new district has the obligation of contracts that are still in force on the first day of operation. However, in the transition, they have the ability to lawfully terminate, pay out, etc. agreements pursuant to the terms of those contracts. So I can't give you a blanket statement because it's going to be governed through contract law.
Okay. Senator Rom?
I guess for me, that begs that has me looking further ahead for when the new foundation formula would be proposed and how we would be expecting to meet all of these obligations with a lower foundation formula than many current school budgets. Okay. When does the foundation formula start vis-a-vis all of this, and how would we ensure they have enough money to meet all of these obligations?
The first year this time that would be disputed. Since there's.
So the foundation formula would be FY 28. Okay.
Chair Conlon, I need to apologize to you. Here is the language that
I found it. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. This is much more specific. So the new union district shall honor all individual employment contracts that are in place in the forming districts on June 30th, 2027 until their respective termination dates. However, if a forming district enters into the contract on or after this May 1st, 2025, this provision shall only apply if the contract expires on or before July 1st, 2029. These dates are worth further consideration. The intent here is to capture a reasonable amount of time for contracts that were entered into before the enactment of the bill, but that do not extend indefinitely or unreasonably into the future, since they do obligate the new district, who, in all fairness, did not enter into them. Okay, so beginning with section 710. On page 75, we have a provision for the creation of a transitional board. This is not the current boards of the forming districts. This is not the new board that would be elected as the first board of the new district. This is the third board, a transitional board. Until the voters, I'm sorry, I'm on line 9 on this page, which is 75. Until the voters of the new union district elect the members of the initial board of directors as set forth in section 711 of this title, and those members are sworn in and assume their duties, the individuals serving on December 15th, 2025 on the boards of the forming districts identified above, including the board of any forming districts that is a union school district on that date, so all the boards, shall designate one of their members to serve on a transitional board of directors for the new union district. In other words, the transitional board. It shall be comprised of the designee from each forming district. This provides on line 18 that the superintendent with the majority of forming districts as new members shall convene the first meeting of the transitional board to occur no later than January 10th, 2026. The agenda for the first meeting of the transitional board shall include the election of a chair and a clerk. On line 4, during the period of existence, the transitional board shall serve as the new union district school board and shall perform all functions required of and have all authority granted to the transitional board here, which are, in addition to any, I'm sorry, I'm on line 9. In addition to any responsibilities of the new union district board that can, should, or must be performed before the initial board members are elected and assume office, the transitional board shall, line 13, prepare a draft of the proposed fiscal year 2028 budget for the new union district, which the transitional board shall provide to the new union board for the consideration at its first meeting. Line 17, selection of a short list of superintendent candidates for the new union district. And then line 18, with respect to the transitional board's duties in this section, the board shall have the assistance of the Agency of Education, including dedicated resources to be paid by transitional funds set aside by the agency for these purposes. So this is the really important and time-bound work of certain transitional duties that we identify ought to take place well before the election of the first board, but that are advisory to the final decision of the elected board. This again is modeled on the process used for the Act 46 state board created districts. Section 711 is where you get the election of the members of the new union school district board. Page 77, line 10, representation. The new union district board shall be composed of 5 individuals elected from the districts. The members shall be elected pursuant to proportional voting districts. Petitions for candidates shall be submitted on the same timeline and in the same manner as candidates for the General Assembly. Elections shall be held on General Election Day 2026. Each new union district board member shall serve a term of 4 years or until his or her successor is elected and qualified. On page 7.
Question, we have a question real quick.
Hey, just a clarifying question, looking at 12 through 13. Can you unpack exactly what the members shall be elected pursuant to proportionate voting districts mean?
So these are districts within each of the 5 school districts that are created for the purpose of serving as a voting district, or some people say a voting ward, for electing a school board member from each. They are proportionate to correspond to constitutional requirements for proportional representation, or as some people say, 1 person, 1 vote. So those districts have to be apportioned similar to the legislative reapportionment process. So by population.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So if it's by population and these districts are combining so many different populations, how are we gonna ensure that in our most rural districts, they get some representation?
This process, the Secretary of State's office, if you want to expand on that. So this process would go as normal through establishing districts. The Secretary of State's office would do this and ensure that there's proportionate representation within those districts.
It feels like all you did is repeat the language in the contract, though. What I'm saying is that when we have districts that have really dense populations that are in the same district with people that have really sparse populations, they're not gonna have any proportion. And so it's all going to go to the denser areas of that district.
I didn't need to repeat it. My intention is to say that expertise for that lies within the Secretary of State's office. I think that would be an important consideration as we're considering continuing campus dialogue. It is an important point. It's not the agency of education's area of expertise to define those boundaries. And it is important to us that the folks with right expertise are here to expand those questions.
Yeah, I might, just because we have a little bit of a time crunch here, maybe we'll dispense with the whole elections process because we have government operations committees that are dealing with that, and maybe jump to section 17, which is back to a little more detail on school choice schools, starting on page 103. Unless there's any objection to that?
Well, could we go to section 15, which is school advisory committees?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
100.
That was so helpful. Thank you.
Bottom of 100.
I
doubt it.
Oh, here we go. So page 100 at the very bottom, section 15, school advisory committees, provides that each school district shall establish a local school advisory committee for each school. Committees shall have membership from parents, community members, and students to represent the gender, racial, and socioeconomic diversity of the school community and shall serve in an advisory role to the school's administration. On line 6, building level principals will administer the application and membership process for the school advisory committees. They shall provide input to the school board on equitable budgeting parameters and feedback on the proposed school district budget each year. Section C, line 10, a school advisory committee shall, through the administration of the building level principal, direct a designated portion of the funding allocated to the school it represents. Annually, the school board shall determine the amount that each school advisory committee will have authority to direct, which shall be equitable with respect to school size or school budget size. Before funds are expended, the school board shall approve the proposed plan developed by the school advisory committee. Section 16 goes on to elements of school choice schools that we discussed above. So in current law, on line 18, section 821 is where we have the law that at the elementary level, each school district shall either maintain a public school or pay tuition. On line 18, you see that we're striking the option to pay tuition. Again, same concept on line 21 and flowing on to page 102 in that paragraph lines 1 through 6. This is removing the tuition payment option at the elementary level in this section. So instead, on line 7, the school board shall adopt a policy on intra-district grade K through 8 choice and update the policy as appropriate. The policy shall state whether and to what extent resident students in elementary grades can choose a school operated by the school district other than the school designated by the district for the student's town of residence. This is reflecting what many of our school districts that operate elementary schools do for intra-district choice policies. This is again crossing out references to payment of tuition in lieu of operation. Page 103, section 17, many of the same concepts, but in this section with regard to the high school grades in current law. So line 9, school district to maintain public high schools, semicolon, school choice schools. So removing the payment of tuition in section 822.
Question from Representative Brady.
On the, I think it was page 101. So where does a student who is K through 6 or K through 8 that doesn't live within 30, 40, 50 miles of it? I think there's only a couple spots where this might exist, but of a public elementary school, where do they get assigned to school?
So this will need to be on a very practical and individual basis, a determination of the school board to, in other words, assign the student to a school operated by the district. And Secretary Saunders might want to speak to the potential need for some exceptions that are not identified here. And this is the very general rule of amending the law.
So as we shared in developing this proposal, is looking at this as a statewide system, not the exception. But I do think at this next juncture, we need to be very clear on where there may be room for exceptions so that the school board has the authority to ensure that the student has access closer. And that may mean that there may need to be exceptions in terms of the school choice process in certain areas.
Yeah.
But I think we should, like everything we've done to this point, make sure that those conversations are data driven. So I think the step around that is really to be able to identify what are the experience in our state and have really thoughtful conversations around really needing sections, because those are going to be practical and the school district is to make decisions that are most important. That is an important conversation, not reflected in that detail in this part.
Yes. Senator Happinen.
So take Essex County, for instance, they have, I think they were in the other day and have 10 towns that they send all their children. They don't have any schools, so they either send them up for Canaan or down, or actually even over to New Hampshire, and that still will be an option under this.
So that would need to be built into this in terms of exceptions or criteria.
Representative Long.
So on page 101, line 19, where it says each school district shall maintain one or more approved schools. Does that mean approved public schools or just simply approved schools? Which could be on the side.
On page 101,
Line 19.
Yeah, that's current law, and it has the meaning of public schools because the school district is maintaining the school in question. I believe what you're seeing on line 19 is fairly old language that relates to a time when there was public school approval, although that's just always been my working understanding of the language. I don't have a specific amendment date for you on that concept.
Okay, so even the word approved could be all of it. Just say.
what's the one choice that?
Thank you.
I think we were going to page 103, section 17. So cross out on lines 13 through the bottom of the page, refer to the current law practice of tuition payment, and they're struck. Beginning on page 104, line 3, we have new duties of the school board. So a school board, which is a school district board, shall designate at least one public or independent school that operates grades 9 through 12 to receive incoming students. This school shall be known as a school choice school. The school board is not required to designate an independent school if it instead designates one or more public schools. If the school choice school or schools designated by the district as an independent school, it shall first be certified by the Agency of Education as meeting requirements in 16 BSA 166. any such designation shall be for a period of 5 years. So if you remember, forever ago, we went over the requirements in section 166 when we talked about independent schools that were certified as meeting requirements to be school choice schools. So that's the reference on line 9. So the on line 11, after reviewing the portfolio of school options for grades 9 through 12 in the district, the school board shall adopt a policy on grade 9 through 12 school choice and update the policy as appropriate. The policy shall take into consideration historic patterns of attendance, capacity of schools, and attendance and geographic needs of the district, along with student interest for specialized educational programming. The policy shall state a number of resident students in grades 9 through 12 that can participate in school choice, which shall be no less than 10% of the number of resident students in grades 9 through 12 for a given year. Line 19, if the district will operate one or more of its public schools as a school choice school, then the school board shall annually announce the capacity for incoming students to attend each such school or schools. And then we're going to get into the provisions of the lottery on page 105. So really starting on line 10, subject to the provisions of this subsection, if more than an allowable number of students wish to participate in school choice, then the district shall use a non-discriminatory lottery system for determining which students may participate in school choice.
I have a question, Senator Hashim.
Just a quick question on page 104 regarding the school choice schools. If there is a public school in that district that does not meet the class size or the school size requirements, will they be required to identify and use a independent school?
No.
So if there's a public school there that's not meeting the class size or the school size requirements, I guess my question is, how does that get enforced, or what will happen to that school?
So I would point you to the provisions we discussed in the education quality standards. So very generally, as with now, those are binding regulatory requirements that schools have to meet. I think your question points to perhaps other knock-on consequences, but the simplest way I know to answer it is the school district is obligated to operate its public schools consistent with the education quality standards, period.
Thank you.
So provisions about the lottery start on page 15. There's a non-discriminatory lottery system for when there's more interest than capacity. Language in this section you're going to maybe find is familiar looking. It's taken from the existing law on public high school choice, which is current law section 822A. In addition to that language on page 106, line 1, in its policy for school choice, the district shall give preference to the school choice request of a student whose request to participate was denied in a prior year. Line 4, the district shall give preference to siblings of students who are currently enrolled in the school choice school. And line 6, the district shall give preference to students who reside closer to the school choice school than a different school operated by the district. So that's in the operation of the lottery.
These are all decisions that a school board would have to make in terms of distances of each individual student, that sort of thing.
Correct. Section 18, you see the repeal of current law of public high school choice because this process will replace existing law, as well as the provision in section 823 of current law regarding the amount of elementary tuition to be paid. Section 824 as payment to school choice schools, replacing current rules about the amount of tuition to be paid. So Line 14, payment for high school students attending a school choice school that is an independent school as defined in section 166 above shall be paid by the agency of education in an amount equal to the weighted base education amount per student as described in the education funding section 4001. The agency of education shall establish rules to govern the schedule and procedures for such payments. So that in short, on lines 17, 18, and 19 is the foundation amount per student.
We have a question, Representative Brady?
That's a foundation amount, but I'm trying to understand the mechanics. Does that mean that if that student resides in one of these new 5 districts, but they're at a school choice school, they're no longer counted in terms of student population at all in that district? They're sort of in a completely separate bucket, funded separately. It's as if, and so whatever subset of your students are in school choice schools are not really counted as one of the students in your district.
They would still need to count to your long-term membership as a resident of your district, but the funding generated as a result would be paid by the AOE to the school choice school that they're attending, only in the case that such school choice school is an independent school. In the case of a public school as a school choice school, the district retains the funding itself for the student because it's operating the public school.
Is your question related more to student enrollment patterns?
No,
Okay.
because I'm trying to follow the taxpayers paying the money, the pot it's going into, and then the pot it's coming out of for those students, and the potential impact on taxpayers in that district, but maybe that's the foundation formula thing, so I will set that aside.
I might, go ahead, I'm sorry, finish
So
it.
there's not a different rate, it's the same. Same amount, really extra. So it's the base plus the weights.
Another option would be to just pass it through the school district.
But it's not, and that's what I'm trying to understand. So if I'm in a district that doesn't have, that if I'm a taxpayer in a district that has very few students in school choice schools, is there potentially a very different impact on me as a taxpayer? If in another district, there are a lot, and funds are coming through the agency of education, not through that district. There's a financial mechanics piece. I realize I'm out over my skis, to use one of our best phrases, in terms of understanding finance here, but I'm
Yeah.
worried about an unintended consequence here.
Maybe we'll hold that question for our Ways and Means Committee. I think I'm gonna call this a good time and place to pause. The rest of it is, just quickly gets into the 2 things you mentioned, about numbers of days and we can, and age of enrollment. But we kind of hit the big parts here. My sort of only closing comment is really along the lines of, carve outs, and this needs to be fleshed out, and there's not pre-K in here, and the schedule that we're on. And I just want sort of recognition that there's a lot here. We're at the end of February. When we talk about just coming up with carve outs for Essex County, 13 towns where they don't operate schools, having done carve outs in chapter 11, and that took about a month or 2 alone. And that was a very easy technical corrections bill that still took months and months. I won't call it easy, it was just time consuming, but it was fairly direct. Which is just to say, I hope that there's a recognition that the schedule that is sort of envisioned here, which includes us passing a law, is ambitious given the amount of work that still remains to be done. So I hope that's recognized.
I think the carve out that you mentioned, really making sure that the districts have the flexibility to be able to make decisions to support their student population.
I was just using that as an example of many of the smaller items that still need to be worked out. Senator Ron?
Obviously, we have a lot of content we can point our constituents to, and there may be other requests. When I think about what we need to communicate to our constituents around town meeting week, I think a visual timeline would be extremely helpful I truly think people are anticipating more savings sooner and more changes to be graduated. And I'm really having a hard time myself trying to visualize where the 180 million savings comes in and how long we're bringing down the property tax rate and how that relates to the timeline that's proposed. So some visual is going to be really important to give Vermonters the truth, you know, just the honest truth about where we're supposed to be getting savings.
It's a fair request.
Is it also, thanks, sir. It's also appropriate to ask for an org chart, just a notional org chart of AOE down to school level, so we can just show our constituents instead of 1,000 words later, this is the intended structure. Is that possible?
So are you thinking roles and responsibilities at every level? Is that where you're thinking?
It doesn't have to be even that complicated, just something they know the construct now, the hierarchy, but they don't really know unless we have to, you know, just explain to try to penetrate.
Step back now and make sure that we're clear on.
So this is yeah.
All right, I'm sure we will be
We know.
picking up we'll be picking up more conversations in the days to come. Thank you very much for being here for two.